Hello, sixth grade, and here we are at Module 7, where you're going to discuss topics involving equations and inequalities. Now, there's a major difference between the two of them, so I want you to definitely be thinking about how you can explain to me the difference. So when you're in your equations module, you will see that you will discuss solutions to equations and inequalities. You're going to look at applications with expressions. You're going to look at how to solve equations, and you'll have a number one and a number two, so kind of a part one, part two. And then you'll look at specifically inequalities, and then you'll look at dependent and independent variables. So some key points here with solutions to equations and inequalities. The idea here is with solutions, you're looking for, does the statement show a true statement? So notice here when you've got different expressions, is it a true statement? Is 10 greater than 9? Yes. Is 10 equal to 9? No, that's a false statement. So what you're looking for are solutions to your equations and inequalities. You're going to be dealing with different symbols that are either less than or equal to. So you'll see the bar, the small bar at the base of the less than or greater than symbol. Or you'll have just an equal to sign. You know you're dealing with an equation versus an inequality. So your different examples, for instance, this says, is the inequality x is greater than or equal to 9 true when x is equal to 7? Well, that would be false because 7 is not greater than or equal to 9. So that solution, 7 as a solution, would be false. So that means it wouldn't be a solution. And so I want you to be able to create an example of an inequality that represents more than one solution. And this would be it. Here's another example of that. 4x plus 5 is greater than 34. If you substitute 7 in for x, is it a true statement? Is 7 a solution? So when you do that, you get 33. After substituting 7 in, you get 33 is greater than 34. Is that a true statement? No, it's not. So that means 7 is not a solution. And so I want you to be able to tell me, well, what is a solution to an equation? What is a solution to an inequality? What does that look like on a number line? Those are topics that I want you to be very familiar with when you're talking about equations and inequalities. I also want you to be mindful of your solving equations, part one and part two. I want you to be able to tell me, well, what is an inverse operation? How do I know if something's balanced? So when you get to something where it talks about inverse operations or solving with opposites, but if you add something to one side, you've got to add it to the other side. If you take away something, a number to one side, you got to take away to the other side. So all these inverse operation ideas are very critical when you are solving equations and inequalities. The golden rule of equations. Be familiar with that and how you solve. You've got lots of examples here that will then take you through this, what is the inverse? Well, those are things that can go in your notes. Any type of vocabulary, any type of comparison. Again, you don't have to write down everything, but here it is. This is an inverse operation. This is a key part of your vocabulary. That ought to be in your notes. When you look at inequalities, the lesson on inequalities, you're gonna see how different words, phrases, and how it represents less than, or fewer than, or greater than, or more than, and what the phrases represent. You got to be careful with how you write certain things. You can't always, your subtraction are definitely tricky. You have to be careful. 7 less than 10, how that's written, and 7 is less than 10. The wording's different, and also the outcome and how you write it is going to be different as well. I want you to be familiar with what is a condition or a constraint. And so if it says Daniel's goal is to score at least 100 points in his current level, well, you need to know that greater than or equal to 100 is the constraint. That's the condition. You're looking for how many points that will put you at greater than or equal to 100. So you've got different solutions. You have a number of solutions that are greater than or equal to 100. So you're just, again, looking for true statements. True statements will satisfy the constraint. So if the constraint is greater than or equal to 100, well, then P needs to be 101, or 100, or 101, or 102, which we would say is anything greater than or equal to 100. 95 doesn't satisfy the constraint, so therefore it's not a solution. So these are items and examples and videos in this lesson that what does an open circle mean? What does a closed circle mean in regard to the number line and how you would graph it? What does it look like? I want you to be able to tell me how to graph something correctly. Finally, with your independent and dependent variables, I want you to be able to explain the difference between what is an independent and what is a dependent variable. And I also want you to be able to give me, or at least explain to me, how you know which is which when given a table of data. So you've got different scenarios. I want you to be able to tell me, okay, well, I know this is going to be the independent and this is going to be the dependent in this scenario. Or if you're given a table, diameter in inches versus circumference in inches, well, which one's the dependent? Which one's going to be the independent? Well, in this case, if you know the diameter in inches, you're going to be able to find the circumference, because circumference is equal to the diameter times pi. So if you know diameter, it's going to result in circumference. So circumference, in this case, you can see different patterns. So circumference in this case would be the dependent, diameter would be the independent. So you're going to go through this lesson. It's going to give you multiple examples of independent versus dependent. You need to be able to know the difference in the two. Not necessarily write an equation. I'm not going to necessarily ask you to do that, but you are learning the foundation blocks of how to piece together information to write an equation, and then how to define those variables. Those are the topics in the key points in this module that'll lead you up to your review and your DBA. And so that those are everything I would ask you and I would want you to be aware of in preparation for that in this Module 7, Equations and Inequalities.